A party of trappers once ate their own dogs to stay alive. They crossed a frontier with nothing. They died searching for water that wasn't there. Later, one man was found with an arrow in his back, face down in a dry hole. This makes you think, how much blood built the map that you already know? Who really opened the West? Was it soldiers, settlers, or ghosts? And why were the first to get there the last to be remembered? Forget what you think you know about pioneers. These trappers were men no one followed because they were never supposed to survive. But it turns out they were the toughest men ever to live. And this is our story for today. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Now, before we dig into the trapper himself, what he faced, how he lived, and what broke him, we need to set the ground. The world he walked, the forces that shaped him. Part 1, The Frontier. 200 years back, the American West was still wild. The plains were full of buffalo and antelope. Elk drank at the rivers. Deer, too. Up in the mountains, wild sheep moved over rocks, sure-footed and quiet. White goats clung to cliffs. Bears hunted deep in the woods. Beavers dammed the streams. Now and then, a small group of native people would quietly pass through. They were watchful. Then the white man came. He came hungry, not for food, but fur. Beavers started disappearing, so the trappers went farther. They moved upstream into valleys no one mapped. They crossed dry, cracked deserts. They carried rifles, steel traps, and not much else. They froze, starved, drowned. Some were killed. Some killed others. Still, they kept going. They were rough men, with hard hands, with worn boots. They didn't talk much, didn't trust easy, but they knew the land like the back of their scarred hands. They came just after the tribes and long before the soldiers and settlers. Lewis and Clark ran into some of them on their famous expedition. The trappers were already out there, far out. Most of what they learned about rivers, passes, trails, weather, it died with them. Some pieces stayed behind, in journals, army notes, old maps, names impressed into wood, rivers named after ghosts. They didn't trap just to make money. It was deeper than that. Older, something built into the bone. They followed the first settlers west. Towns sprouted up after that, and trade grew with it. The fur business turned big. It started way up north with men like Radisson and Groseilliers. Hudson's Bay Company came from that. Astor got rich off it in the States, but today's episode isn't about the business. It's about the man, the trapper, the mountain man. What he was, how he lived, what it cost. He came from all over. Frenchmen from the northeast. They were the wild, reckless types. Coureurs des bois, they call them. Then there were the Spaniards who came up from the south. They never got a strong hold in that part of the New World. Scots and English, on the other hand, pushed in from Canada. Men like the Henrys, Thompson, Mackenzie. They marched west with flags and company rules. And speaking of Henry, Mackenzie, and other legends, we've got a special episode that's over 12 hours long. It features 11 legendary mountain men who conquered the American wilderness. So, be sure to check it out after this one. In the meantime, even Russians were trading fur on the far coast in the 1700s. And by century's end, Boston merchants showed up too. Then came the Americans, early 1800s. They took over. St. Louis became the heart of it all. After the Louisiana Purchase, trapping exploded. For 40 years, the trade held strong. There's a book that tells the whole thing. Captain H.M. Chittenden wrote it. It's slow, steady, and full of rich detail. Not many copies out there, but the ones who know, they swear by it. Still, that's not what this episode is about. This is about the man out in the cold, setting traps by hand, sleeping with one eye open, always moving. He didn't leave much behind, just a trail, a name, a story half told, and the land still holding his tracks. The American fur trader lived by one rule: keep moving. No glory and no pause. If it cost him his life, or someone else's, so be it. That's how the wilderness was taken. Not with speeches, and certainly not with armies, but with grit and loss. He feared nothing, answered to no one. He ruled his patch of wild like a king without a crown. If rivals got in the way, he broke them, cheated them, fought them. He drank hard, lived hard, and died harder. And still, through all the dirt and blood, something fierce and strong stood tall in him. He was both the worst and the best of what a man can be when he's pushed to the edge. Wolfe and Napoleon had armies behind them. They redrew the map with war. But the fur trader? He went out alone. Sometimes two men together. Never more. They didn't have any backup. They had no orders to follow. All they had was a rifle, a blade, and a few traps. And still, they took a continent. They carved out a new world. They left behind a people shaped by the fight. Think of John Colter. Manuel Lisa found him coming out of the wild a century ago. He had nothing but what he carried: a pack, a gun. No one saw him leave. No one cheered him back. We've also got a special 8-hour episode on John Colter, so be sure to check it out if you haven't already. Then there was Williams from Arkansas. He slipped down rivers at night. He hid by day. He glided past danger with his paddles wrapped in cloth. He slept behind branches in the middle of the current. And if trouble came near, he cut the line and disappeared with the flow. Men crossed the Cimarron with pack horses, choked on dust and heat. Some, like Becknell's crew, had to kill and eat their own dogs. Others died with their hands in the sand, digging for water that never came. Rocky Mountain Smith fell that way, arrow in the back, body bent over a shallow hole. Yet those who made it to places like Pierre's Hole, they carried pelts on their backs, or climbed out of canyons with knives jammed into the rock. The river below was too wild for boats, the cliffs too sharp for horses. And when it got too rough to go alone, they joined forces. They followed men like Astor in the west or Mackenzie up north. Together they crossed frozen seas. They sailed through ice and midnight sun. They didn't think much of it, no more than we'd think of hopping a train. Similarly, back in 1787, when the world was still being mapped, one man, Ledyard, a restless soul from Connecticut, didn't wait around. He set out from London, crossed Europe, and ventured deep into Russia. His goal was to reach Kamchatka, then Alaska, and finally walk across North America. He made it as far as Yakutsk before Russian authorities, suspicious of his intentions, arrested him and deported him to Poland. Then there was Farnham. Different path, same fire. He hit the Oregon Trail, made it to California, even passed through the Sandwich Islands. No trip across Asia, but he saw his share of wild country. Farnham's in that 12-hour episode I mentioned earlier too, so if you're into his story, don't skip that one when you're done watching this. But yeah, the American fur trader lived by one rule: keep moving forward. Just keep going, no matter the cost. Even if someone died, even if it was him. And that's how the wilderness was taken, one step at a time. Part 2. The Trapper. Now look at a map. Pick a spot, anywhere between the Gulf and Hudson Bay, the Great Lakes and the Rockies. Then ask, who got there first? The answer's always the same: the French trapper. You see, back in the 1600s, English nobles were broke and edgy, so they became raiders. Spanish lords, on the other hand, chased gold, so they turned to piracy. But young Frenchmen, they went into the fur trade. They hated farming. To them, it was too slow and too tame. They wanted freedom, fast money, big living, and the wild offered all that. It didn't take much to start. You didn't need a land or titles, just guts. Enough guts to paddle deep into the unknown. Merchants back in the city had the money. They were happy to outfit canoes with food, tools, and trade goods. For what it would cost today, about $168,000, they could send 4 men out for 2 years. The returns? Massive. 8 times the investment. Easy. The merchants took their cut, and the rest went to the men who survived. If a trapper made it back alive, he could walk away with what would now be worth almost $100,000. That's for 2 years of work. Rough, bloody work. And some made even more. When the French started pushing up the Missouri from Louisiana or crossing west from Michilimackinac, the stakes got higher. 2 partners once returned from an 18-month run through the enormous hunting lands near Lake Superior and the upper Missouri. They came back with fur worth the modern equivalent of $6.7 million. To those French nobles, the wilderness was a treasure ship waiting to be plundered. France tried to stop it. They tried to keep men on the farms. They made laws. They said no trade without a license. And if you broke the rules, the punishment was harsh. Heavy fines, hard labor, sometimes death. It didn't matter, though. The trappers just stayed out longer. They'd disappear into the wild, haul in enough to buy their way out of trouble. Or they just never came back. And that's how they became coureurs des bois, voyageurs, leaders of wild bands who answered to no one. Some ruled the forests like lords, half savage, half noble. A strange breed, part old world, part new. And they never looked back. East of the Mississippi, the French trapper kept his distance. He didn't trust the English settlers. He didn't trust the Iroquois either. And north of the St. Lawrence, it got worse. The French governor had power there, legal power. He could take your furs if you didn't carry the right papers. But west, between St. Louis and the Mackenzie River, lay a no-man's land. There were no flags and no kings there. It was a cold, open country full of game. The best pelts came from there, so that's where the trapper went. There were 4 ways to reach it. 1, he could sail from Quebec to the mouth of the Mississippi, then head upriver by dugout or pirogue. That took money, though. Not many could afford it. 2, cross overland from Detroit to the Illinois or Ohio rivers, then build a raft and float down to the Mississippi. Then from there, he'd switch to canoe and go north. 3, he could start from Michilimackinac. That was a big meeting spot for hunters. Then he'd head to Green Bay, paddle up the Fox River, carry over to the Wisconsin, and then drift down to the Mississippi. Or 4, take the Ottawa River, go through the Sioux, then across Lake Superior and west. It didn't matter which way he took. It was always upstream, always north. They called that wild land Pays d'en Haut, or the upper country. It stretched between the Missouri and the Mackenzie, totally untamed. As mentioned earlier, the French trapper was different from the others. Even when he worked for old enemies, hauling goods, running furs, he held his head high. He still chased la gloire, or glory. He still hung on to pride. He lived hard, and he died harder. One day he'd feast, next day, nothing. He gambled away his shirt, laughed when the snow closed in, took chances like it was a game. He sang old songs, Norman songs, rough and loud. He swore at the rapids. Then he crossed himself and whispered a prayer to Sainte Anne, protector of the voyageurs. Then the boat dropped into the whitewater. Men like Manuel Lisa, the Spanish fur boss in St. Louis, might sit at a desk and count stacks of pelts. The Scots, they haggled with tribes over beaver prices. But the French trapper, he wanted the river. Give him a canoe sliding past dense woods, the keel tapping the current, birds flying above, wind swirling the sky like smoke, Clouds above, clouds mirrored below, and his boat caught between, floating quiet like a bird on a breath. Sometimes the wind picked up. They'd hoist a blanket, and their canoe would snap forward like a gull skimming the waves. That's what the French trapper wanted. But the calm would never last. Part 3. The Journey. When the water would narrow and surge, everyone knew. No one spoke. The bowman would stand, eyes locked forward, pole in hand. The river would roar. Banks blurred. The trapper's canoe would jolt. Not gliding now. No, it would leap, crash, and bounce off the push of water. And underneath, it was all motion. Lively, loud motion. The front of the boat would lift, and it would ride the waves. A rock would rise sharply from the middle of the stream. The bowman would lunge, one quick jab of the pole. Then, paddles would move fast, all at once. The canoe would break past the danger. Another shove, another sweep, and just like that, they were clear. But the river changes. It gathers itself like a beast about to leap. The sound builds, not just water now, but power. Then it hits. A sharp and deep crash. The paddlers lean back in the same breath. No shouting, no warning. It was all based on instinct. The canoe lifts at the bow, spray flashes white. She rises and drops in the same second. Then they're flying. Down the chute, over the fall. No one says a thing. Nothing unusual. They're simply jumping the rapids, and the men are soaked. Maybe someone laughs. Maybe it's Jean or Baptiste or that fancy one in the clean sash, because his moccasins are wet now, and he hates that. They lean back in. One man stops to scoop out water with his hat. Then they keep going, always forward. When the canoes are loaded down on the way back, however, it's different. Then they have to stop. If the water runs deep enough to float the full weight, they wade in. One man stays in to guide her. The rest haul the canoe upstream with ropes. Tracking. If the rapids are bad, they don't risk it. Each man grabs his load, straps it to his back, the cords biting into the forehead. They walk the shore. A long portage is counted in pipes, not in miles. 1 smoke for a short one. 2, maybe 3 for a tough stretch. They don't complain. Even in the heat, they run. 9 miles long, that portage near Chaudière Falls. They did it without a word. Winter, however, is something else. Entirely. The voyageur becomes a runner of the woods. 6 months of snow. White silence. No end to it. The trees are heavy with it. The sky, too. They sleep in pine beds or wrapped in furs. Fire raging to keep out the wolves. Snow melts in pots. Meat sizzles on a stick. Sometimes they travel far. Dog sleds cutting across the cold. The driver yells, "March donc! March donc!" Dog bells ring in the frost. Other times the storm hits. A full whiteout. No sky, no land, only wind and snow, and nothing else. A lone man caught too late might lay beneath a drift, blanket pulled tight, waiting for the dark to take him. And all of this, for the French trapper, was just life. Part 4. The Wilderness. 3 enemies waited for the trapper out there. Always waiting. The first was the wolf pack. Wolves were always cold-hearted, fast, and hungry, but the trapper knew how to deal with them, barely. The second was the hostile native, who was often stirred up by rival traders. The French trapper knew this too. He spoke the language, shared their fire, lived close, closer than most. That helped, not always though, but enough to last. The third enemy was worse. It was meaner and a lot smarter. And it didn't come on 2 legs. No name spoken louder in anger than this one. Wolverine, the Carcajou, a thief with teeth like a bear and the nerve of 10 men. It didn't take long to meet him. Maybe the day after the trapper got his first deer. With snow all around, blood'll rise in the air in no time. The trapper sees the prints. Small prints like a child's hand. Otter? Mink? Pecan, maybe? Could be. Could also be worse. But he knows meat alone won't bait them now. They've already had a taste. So he sets traps, small ones, carefully hidden, covered in snow, and there's no sign of man left behind. So sometimes he drags a deer hide across the snow to cover his scent. He wipes everything down with castoreum or pomatum. Maybe he handles the traps with hide instead of skin. Pecan travel in pairs, so he rings the carcass with traps. Next morning, he's back. He's hopeful. But it's a mess. Most of the deer is gone. All kinds of animals came to feed, but nothing in the traps. One trap sprung and half broken. Another's tossed down a hollow. Useless. A third caught a pecan, but the thing was ripped apart and destroyed by teeth. Another trap was flipped from the back like someone was laughing at him. And some traps simply vanished. Even the forest beasts don't usually eat each other when food is near. But this? Oh, this was different. The trapper swears under his breath. The damn wolverine. So the trapper decides to get clever. He hides strychnine in the meat with a steel rod, then pokes it in grain by grain. But, waste of time. Next day, the meat's ripped up, torn, ruined, poisoned, and useless. Bones scattered like leaves. So, he tries a deadfall trap next. He builds it solid, heavy. Then he comes back again. Oops. Deadfall's busted. Smashed from behind. Robbed clean. Nothing left but broken pieces and empty snow. And that's the wolverine for you. It doesn't kill for hunger. It doesn't steal for need. Just does it because he can. The trapper knew the signs. It was the carcajou, the wolverine, and all the stealing happened at night. That told him something. Wolverines hunt in the dark. The traps had been circled, not approached head-on. That was another clue. The wolverine won't cross a man's track. It goes around, always cautious. The meat had been left untouched, even though it stank of poison. Maybe the beast didn't know what poison was. Still, it wouldn't risk it. The traps had been flipped and left open. No other animal does that. Too dangerous for them. But the wolverine is curious, always watching, always messing. And the tracks didn't spread out across the land like a fox or badger. No, they looped back, straight to cover. The wolverine isn't just one thing. It's bold, suspicious, greedy, smart, a troublemaker, a thief, a killer, but also a cleaner. It keeps the north from rotting, takes care of what's broken or dying. It doesn't show mercy, doesn't pretend to. It smells everything, has a nose like a fox. Its teeth are long, crooked, and are meant for tearing. Its eyes sit deep, green and cold, and sharp as a blade. They watch like they understand, not in a soft way, not like a dog, but with a kind of knowing that hunts. It raids everything. Muskrat huts, gopher holes, calves tucked under brush, waiting for their mothers to return. It robs traps, caches, graves, even lodges. Native, settler, it doesn't care. One old trapper, fed up and tired, spat out the truth. He didn't mind losing a race to a wolf, didn't mind getting outsmarted by a clever man. But to be beaten by a beast the size of a hog, with a fox's nose, a bear's claws, and fur like a porcupine's back? That stung. That got under his skin. And it won't cross your path either, but it'll follow behind, quietly, waiting, because it knows what you know. It knows that there's food in the traps when you're resting and food in your cabin when you're out checking the lines. But even the wolverine has weak spots. 2 of them. It wants too much, and it always wants to know. And that's how you get him. That's the hook. There's a story from James Bay, Moose Factory. A native hunter and his wife nearly starved. Every night the wolverine tore up their traps. Day after day, nothing to eat. They had to walk 100 miles just to get away from that cursed thing. Bad devil, they said. Oh, bad devil. The trapper knows what he's up against. The thing's smart and mean, knows how to work around steel and bait. So he changes his game. He waits for snow, because fresh snow hides his scent and covers his tracks. Then he picks a spot where the wolverine passes. There he drops meat, something strong, rotten fish or old bacon. Then he circles the bait with his toughest traps, chains them to poles, stakes, small trees, and now he's ready. Night falls. He waits. Then comes morning. The bait is gone. Not a print in the snow. It looks untouched. But he's not fooled. He checks. One stake is missing, dragged off, and that's the clue. He pokes around the snow slowly and carefully. A trap is gone. But a wolverine got caught, but it wasn't held by the missing trap. It pulled so hard it broke the sapling loose, didn't chew its own leg off like a fox might. No, this thing grabbed the trap in its teeth and hobbled off on 3 legs. And it doesn't hide in the woods. That's too easy to track. It heads to the river where there's flat ice and no trail, and high banks to block the wind and eyes. The trapper follows slowly, carefully. Then he finds it. Just the trap, bent out of shape, spring pried open. The carcajou had stopped, thought it through, and figured how to free its own leg. And so it's still alive, still out there. And by the way, if you're into this stuff, we've also got an episode on how frontiersmen used to hunt, and another one that breaks down the kinds of traps trappers used back then. Worth checking out after this one. But for now, the weary trapper plans to set his last trick to try and get that devilish wolverine. The gun. He buries it under brush. Full cock. Across from the barrel he sets bait, ties it to the trigger. Just a tug, and the gun fires. Simple and final. Most animals would be gone after one scare like that trap, wouldn't come back. But not the wolverine. It doesn't scare. It gets bold, keeps coming night after night. And the trapper knows. Until he kills it, his traps will stay empty, and he'll die from starvation. He's probably tried this trick before, maybe more than once. Cord chewed through, bait gone, no shot fired. The carcajou doesn't fall for much, but hunger and curiosity always pull it close enough. And one day, close will be close enough. So, the man waits. He watches. He's learned where the wolverine runs, same stretch of trees, same hour, every night. Then he sets the trick. He finds a chunk of meat, just the right weight, heavy enough to hold down a cocked trigger, but not heavy enough to set it off. He strings the gun up in a thick evergreen, hidden. The meat dangles just out of reach, right above where the wolverine will come sniffing. Then the game begins. One morning, the man sees tracks circling the tree. The wolverine knows something's off. So it paces around, round and round, trying to figure it out. Next morning, the tracks stop, right under the bait. The animal stands there a long while, snow pressed down where its body sat. Maybe if he could just reach it, just one sniff would tell him if man scents on that meat, but he can't. So he waits, thinks. So does the trapper. And he grins. He just has to hold still. The wolverine might grow bold, might come back again and again, nosing closer. And maybe the man's hand twitches toward the trigger early. Maybe he tries his luck. But if he waits, really waits, then one night, hunger wins. Curiosity too. And it's curiosity that finally gets the better of the genius. And with that, the wolverine jumps, its claws flash. And in that instant, the trap springs. Flame, smoke, and a crack that rumbles through the trees. The creature's body goes limp, The man keeps that ground. He's alone out here. And of all the beasts that stalk a trapper's camp, the wolverine's the worst. It won't give up. It's worse than any bear and any wolf. Still, for those who feel more for the animal than the man, know this: most times, the wolverine wins. And in the end, if the trapper had a crest, like the old world knights, it'd be simple. A canoe, a snowshoe, a musket, a beaver, a buffalo. No lions or dragons like those knights. Just the mark of a man who walked into hell, didn't flinch, and came out standing.